Welcome. Thanks for joining me on a rainy day. I'm going to talk to you about the H4e recorder that I recently got my hands on. Now, for some context, I've used the older H1n, the smaller one, many years ago until it stopped working. And a lot of the recording I do is using a swivel mic like this one. I am hand holding it today. That's not normally my style, but the reason that I wanted to record this way was in other reviews they mentioned that the plasticky exterior of this gave some transfer sounds of like you can hear the handling of it as you're moving around. So I wanted to record in sort of that worst case scenario so that you guys could hear for yourselves if you feel that that's happening, rather than use it on a stand. Now, over the last month that I've had this, I've used it with a lavalier mic out of the 3.5mm jack. It also has two XLR jacks on the bottom that double as larger TRS plugs if you want to go that way. That kind of versatility on this is huge, and to kind of set the stage for why to me that's so significant, years ago when I did a lot of recording more than I do just for YouTubing now, was to produce podcasts for my wife and a few other folks where they were often interviewing other people. And I remember the 20 minutes or more of setup that I would often have to do with an audio mixer and cables everywhere just to get everything ready to roll. And thinking back on that now, I'm like, if I could just have something I could hold in my hand that would record 3 tracks or at least 2 of audio simultaneously with those mics right out of it without having to have an external power source that I was always trying to run extension cables to and it was always in the way, man, would that be huge. Now, it's interesting because I am recording the audio for the review of this with itself. Anytime I review a microphone, I do that so you can get a sense of what the recording quality is like. And while on the whole, I'm happy that it does 32-bit recording because I agree it does give you more headroom and flexibility, I think some of the claims of it makes it impossible to clip are exaggerated because when I've done some hand-holding audio with this, if it's too close to my mouth or if I'm too loud at one point, especially the P sounds, the plosives that everybody recommends you put the cover over it for, you can definitely still clip, and I have using this. So I just make that note to say it could make it less likely that you're going to clip than a traditional recording format, but it can still happen. But the advantage, though, when it's working properly, is that you don't have to set your gain level like you would on other recorders and stuff. And again, back to my memories of recording podcasts and interviews, that was a big part of the process. And I never really liked doing it, not just because it was time consuming, but I actually felt it made the warm-up stage harder because if you had a guest who was already nervous to be on camera, the host would want to chat them up to warm them up for a few minutes prior to like lights, camera, action. And it's harder to do that if the sound guy is still being like, okay, testing, all right, say something again, and I had to do that a lot to get the level. The idea on this that it has a high gain and a low gain and it switches between them at will based on what it's hearing with the headroom that you have with 32-bit float, the combo of that is pretty cool. Definitely time saving, and I think it's useful for someone who's pretty technical and works professionally in this, but it's a great entry point for a YouTuber or an ASM artist or a run and gun journalist who just wants to get audio for quotes or interviews, or even just someone like myself who's relatively technical but doesn't always want to get bogged down with a gazillion settings when he's going to do something. And so the idea with this that you can get a bunch of the settings that you want dialed in the first time and then pretty much just turn it on and hit record a lot of the time and know that it's going to handle that for you, it's really nice. I think that that's great. Some of the other reviews of this, I think, were from like professional engineers, and they were a little more skeptical of some of the aspects of this. So it's possible for really high-end settings that this isn't totally sufficient compared to some of the other options on the market. But from my perspective, coming from an audio enthusiast and somebody who has done semi-professional recording stuff, I think this is a great package. And the total price tag on it isn't that much higher than the Yeti mic that I use a lot of the time. I think this was like $160 when I got it. A lot of people knock these mics, I know they're a bit of a cliche at this point, but they're popular for a reason. And They deliver good audio quality. I use it a lot in videos that I do, but I bring that up just to say, for not a whole lot more money, with this, you're getting pretty comparable recording quality off of the main mic. I don't think it captures the kind of the lower richness tone of the voice as well as the Yeti does, but that's the only real difference that I notice. Otherwise, the mic quality is pretty solid. And the fact that you're getting a mic and basically a whole audio interface and 32-bit recording portably, that's a lot for the package. I just think that's worth pointing out to people. Other features on it that are really nice that they've upgraded is USB-C connectivity. Yes, because the H1n that I had years ago was still using ancient micro USB, and some of these, looking at you, Yeti, devices that you still get on the market, for some reason, are still using micro USB. That's annoying to have to go digging for a cable when it's not something that we generally use for any of our devices these days. And it doesn't have the durability in terms of how many plugs and unplugs and bends and things. A port is rated for. Modern USB-C is way higher than that. And for a portable device like this, that's important. Transfer speeds when you're pulling your files off of this aren't amazing. It still seems like it's kind of USB 2 speeds, but luckily audio tracks aren't as gigantic as video files, so generally for me that hasn't posed a big problem. Navigating around on this thing, there's a little scroll wheel on the side. You can just cycle through menus, and then there's a little enter button where you can go down layers and set things up. It's maybe less ideal than if this were a touch interface that we're all used to these days, but that would obviously drive the price up more. I don't find it that difficult to get around in it, and like I said, for me, most of my usage of this is largely run and gun, where I'm setting most of these settings initially the first time, and then I'm not changing a whole lot after that. I like the battery flexibility. You can use regular alkalines or nickel metal hydrides, which I do a lot of the time for flashlights and all of my other gadgets, and you can even tell it that in the settings that you're using that style of battery, and it optimizes the battery life around that voltage, which is great. And this thing lasts long enough, it's rated for 10 hours of recording time, that even if I saw at the beginning of a session that I had 50% power, as long as I was recording something less than an hour, I would feel confident to just run with it, with that, because this lasts plenty for that kind of thing. And if I had a gripe about this, if anything, it's two things related to the way that it saves files. One is the file format. It puts everything you've recorded that day inside of a folder that numerically is essentially the date starting with the year and then the month and stuff. Sometimes, though, that can get a little overwhelming with a gazillion folders if I have to look through, and I just don't prefer that necessarily. And the other thing that it does is, even if you set it to record mono, which I have done here instead of the stereo that the built-in mics have, because for this type of setting mono makes more sense, it still saves a duplicate of your recording that was stereo alongside it. If I'm nitpicking, I would say, for not wasting additional space, if I've told you I want to record in mono, I don't want you to double or more my storage usage by making an unnecessary duplicate of this track. It's unlikely that I'm going to be wrong and it turns out I did need stereo, and boy, I'm glad that it arbitrarily saved this extra version of the track just so that I have it after the fact. I would much rather it just not. But that's a nitpick. It's not a huge deal. Audio tracks don't take up nearly as much space as video does, so your mileage may vary on that. But that's the most standout thing that I wish was a little different about this. Only other thing I could think of is I wish they had included a belt clip on the back of this, because since you can plug a lavalier mic into it, and it's one of the features that they really highlight, the ability to clip this recorder to your belt, so you have the lav cable coming up, would be really nice. And since you don't have this, and this is kind of a fat device to try to stuff in your pocket, that's a little tricky sometimes. Otherwise, though, I like the ability to do my recordings outside, like I do some of my nature and outdoors tools videos about using a lav mic with this, and it's done pretty well for that. So on the whole, I could definitely recommend this. I've gotten a lot out of it, and I plan to work it more regularly into my recording flow. You'll probably see it in subsequent videos that I do. And so if there's anything I haven't talked about in here that you're wondering as you watch this, feel free to put that down below and I'll do my best to answer it. If you are looking for a recorder like this and you're interested in one, I will put a link in the description as well. It is an affiliate link if you'd like to help me out and help me continue making this kind of content. If you don't mind clicking that link when you go to buy it, that would be great. It doesn't cost you any extra, and I appreciate that. Otherwise, if you have thoughts about your own recording, whether you are an engineer or just someone like me who's an enthusiast and you've dabbled with different devices, if you think this is a big step up from what you are using, or on the other hand, if you think you have something that's more ideal than this, share that as well. I always love to learn and love reading those kind of remarks. Makes me feel like I have a cool community behind me. I know when I read that kind of stuff, and I appreciate that. So please leave your thoughts below, and otherwise, guys, I'll catch you in the next one, and I thank you for watching.